The guest, Phil, who describes themselves as non-binary births, told the host that giving birth doesn't make them mothers. The guest, identified as Danny, told presenter Phil McGraw, 72, "I don't define myself as a mother," while describing the spiritual experience of giving birth on Wednesday's episode. Danny's statement came out during a discussion about whether efforts to include trans and non-binary people on the show exclude women. For example, Dr. Phil talked about how inclusive terminology such as people with a womb and people who gave birth is increasingly replacing the term woman. This sparked a debate among guests on show, with women's activist Kara Dansky claiming that movement had diminished idea of womanhood and women's achievements throughout history. She claimed that women had to struggle for hundreds of years in this country because they were excluded in all areas from politics to school simply because of gender. Most of us who support these movements won't go back and argue that sex isn't a meaningful, legal, physical category, Dansky said. Danny claimed that non-binary birth persons were underrepresented in popular culture. However, the other guest, HIV and trans activist Chandi Moore, argued that trans women who identify as women would only help rather than harm the women's movement. Then why don't you let another group of women join your struggle? More force in numbers. That's when Danny offered a third point of view. They said, "For those who don't know, I gave birth to my child at home 20 months ago. I did this as a non-binary person, not as a woman, just to be very clear." Dr. Phil's host is Phil McGraw. Despite Danny's preferred terminology, the parent claimed that their intent was not to delete women, but that there was a difference between include and split. "I use the person who gave birth. I know many women who have given birth who do not identify as mothers because there is a difference between the two." A transgender man who gave birth in Los Angeles in 2020 criticized hospital staff who insisted on calling him mom instead of daddy. He reportedly began making the transition in 2014, a process that involved undergoing a $5,000 top surgery. Chandi Moore. Danny complained about the lack of language, books, and podcasts on the subject, claiming that non-binary childbearers were grossly underrepresented. "When I was pregnant, I had very little support from outside my community as I give birth due to the lack of inclusive language. Inclusive language is not just about language. It's about opening doors. It's about creating space for others." The parent ultimately explained that they didn't want to kick the women out. "We want to join you in your fight because we know what it feels like to be wiped out every day," Danny said. NIW.